case of Brianna Zunino. A lot of people are concerned that an autopsy is scheduled today to identify a woman's body that was found in Reno, Nevada, on Friday. There is a possibility that it could be the missing college student, Brianna Dennison. The body was found in a field on the edge of the campus of the University of Nevada, which is less than 10 miles from the house where Dennison was last seen in the winter of 2008. Brianna Zunino Dennison, a vibrant 19-year-old college student with a bright future, vanished without a trace, sending shockwaves through the community and igniting a relentless search for answers. As news of Brianna's disappearance spread, an army of volunteers, law enforcement agencies, and concerned citizens came together, determined to bring her home safely. Brianna's family and friends, gripped by fear and uncertainty, clung to hope while sharing stories of her infectious laughter, unwavering spirit, and love for life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as the search intensified. The quest for answers led investigators down a dark and twisted path, uncovering a heinous series of crimes. Law enforcement tirelessly pursued leads, meticulously piecing together the puzzle surrounding Brianna's disappearance. Their dedication and determination remained unwavering in their pursuit of justice. This is the story of Brianna Zunino Dennison, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire. Brianna Zunino Dennison was born on March 29, 1988, to Jeff Dennison and Bridget Dennison. Her mother lovingly called her Breezy because she reminded her of a refreshing breeze on a cool summer day. When Brianna was 6 years old, her father passed away, which was a difficult time for the family as the loss of a loved one always is. However, she persevered through the pain with the support of her loved ones. She spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and her mother's native town of Mendocino, California. Brianna's passion for traveling and world cultures took her to Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. She studied abroad in Rome, Italy, for a year with her family. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life became part of her radiant personality. Brianna was raised in a tradition that valued children as the most precious possessions. Her relatives and close friends instilled in her the importance of being a loving, spiritual, respectful, and trusting human being. She had a deep affection for children and animals, particularly her dog, Ozzy. Brianna graduated from Reno High School in 2006 and was a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College, where she was majoring in child psychology. On January 20, 2008, Brianna returned home to Reno from sunny Santa Barbara during the winter break to visit some friends and family. She and her friends had attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours, LLC, a travel agency that catered to students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno, which Brianna had reportedly attended in the past. On that specific day, she was last observed alive at approximately 4 a.m. Pacific time at her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus on McKay Court in Reno. She had gone there to sleep after attending a party at the Sands Regency on North Arlington Avenue. When her friend woke up the next morning around 9 a.m., Brianna was nowhere to be found. A small bloodstain was noticed on the pillow where Brianna had slept that night, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were all left at the house, which prompted her friend to alert Brianna's parents and local authorities. When investigators arrived, they assessed the crime scene. In the following days, detectives conducted a forensic investigation of the McKay Court residence where Brianna was staying when she was abducted. They found DNA on a doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The investigators were able to confirm that the blood on the pillow belonged to Brianna and began focusing on a kidnapping scenario. The detectives began searching the University of Nevada, Reno area for Brianna, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the search efforts. The DNA found on the doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was linked to at least 2 sexually motivated attacks in the same area in the previous months, one on November 13th and the second on December 16th, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a woman from Reno claimed that she knew another victim who had revealed that she was raped at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada, Reno campus in October 2007. However, the victim had not reported the crime. The The investigators released a description of the potential suspected perpetrator based on this information, which was considered a positive lead. Identifiers used by women who had been sexually assaulted by the suspect were used to track down the perpetrator. The detectives began interviewing nearly 100 registered sex offenders who live within a mile of the McKay Court home, but none seemed to be responsible for Brianna's disappearance. Around 1,700 people, including Nevada's then First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, wife of then Governor Jim Gibbons, volunteered to participate in a physical search of a 100-square-mile area to find Brianna, who went missing, but to no avail. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez in Reno was just returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant. As he was walking by the road, he noticed bright orange-colored fabrics standing out among a pile of discarded tree limbs lying in a ditch near a Reno business park. When he approached closer, he discovered neon orange socks, which were attached to feet, which at first he thought was a mannequin, but later turned out to be a woman. Jimenez had heard about Brianna Dennison's kidnapping, but didn't think the victim resembled the photographs he had seen on billboards. Jimenez did not have a mobile phone, so he promptly returned to his workplace, EE Technologies, to call the Reno police. When the police arrived at the South Reno lot, Jimenez was informed that the victim was Brianna Dennison. As an autopsy report had confirmed that the body found in a field near a Reno business park was hers, Brianna had been assaulted and killed. A piece of underwear was also found near Brianna's body, along with DNA evidence from the perpetrator and an unknown female. The police believed that the underwear did not belong to Brianna and might have been left there too to taunt the investigators. The police then asked anyone who recognized the underwear as theirs to come forward, as they might have information about the perpetrator's identity, but no one came forward. On January 29, 2008, the Reno police released a description of the unknown perpetrator. The person in question was also linked to at least 2 sexual assaults in November and December 2007, and a woman claimed to have been raped in a parking lot in October. Previous victims had provided enough detailed information for the police to sketch a suspect. An item of underwear was found near Dennison's body, along with the killer's DNA and the DNA of an unidentified woman. The police stated that the item of clothing did not belong to Dennison and may have been left near her body to taunt the investigators. The police are asking anyone who recognizes the item of clothing as theirs to come forward, as they may know the identity of the perpetrator. On Tuesday, November 25, 2008, 27-year-old James Michael Bella from Sparks, Nevada, was arrested and taken into custody at the Washoe County Jail. He was charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Bella was apprehended while he was dropping off his son at the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. Bella had already provided the police with a DNA sample collected from a doorknob in Brianna's friend's house. The detectives also discovered that Bella was a former Marine and had been previously arrested in 2001 for threatening his former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. On Wednesday, November 26, 2008, during a press conference held by the Reno Police Department, it was confirmed that the DNA collected from Bella matched the DNA found at the crime scene, positively linking him to the murder of Brianna Dennison and a previous sexual assault. It was also revealed that a friend of his girlfriend had turned in Bella via the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after Bella's girlfriend had confided to this friend that she had found underwear unknown to her in Bella's truck as they were coming back from Washington State, where Bella had taken a job in March 2008. News media reports of Brianna's case, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle used in another rape, the month before Brianna's abduction, began circulating. Bella was questioned by detectives about his atrocity after the secret witness tip came in, but he denied his involvement and declined to provide a DNA sample. Bella's girlfriend was also questioned and gave police permission to obtain DNA from her 4-year-old son, whom Bella had fathered. The test confirmed that his direct relative, Bella in this case, had left a DNA sample collected at the home where Brianna Dennison was abducted and at the other rape that had taken place the prior month. On his way to Washington, it was also revealed that Bella had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the previous sexual assault. At the press conference, officials mentioned that the vehicle was being returned to Reno to be searched and used as evidence in the case against him. On Thursday, May 27, 2010, Bella was found guilty of the murder of Brianna Dennison, and after deliberating for about 9 hours, the jury returned a guilty verdict for all counts against Bella, which included kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The defense attorneys argued against the death penalty, stating that Bella suffered an abusive childhood due to an alcoholic father, that he had been a productive member of society before his crimes, and that he was a model prisoner. However, the jurors did not accept these mitigating factors and handed out the death sentence. On July 30th, 2010, Bella was sentenced to 4 additional life sentences for multiple counts of rape and kidnapping associated with attacks on 2 victims before Brianna's abduction and murder. Over the years, Bella's appeals have been denied. The story of Brianna Zunino Dennison is one of resilience, heartbreak, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Brianna's family, who faced unimaginable pain and uncertainty, stood strong in their fight for justice. Their unwavering determination became a beacon of hope for others facing similar tragedies. The legacy of Brianna's story reaches far beyond her case. It has sparked crucial conversations, inspired community initiatives, and brought awareness to the issues of violence and safety. Law enforcement's tireless efforts ultimately led to the apprehension and conviction of the individual responsible for Brianna's abduction and murder. Their dedication and unwavering commitment to finding justice showcase the power of teamwork and determination. As we remember Brianna, we hold on to the memories of her vibrant spirit, her love for life, and the impact she had on those who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and standing up against violence. In the end, Brianna Zunino Dennison's legacy will live on not only through the love of her family and friends, but through the collective efforts to create a safer world for others. This case takes us to Rockdale, a village in the state of Illinois, located a little over 40 miles west of Chicago. May the 13th, 1997 started out like any other typical day in Rockdale, Illinois. The sun was beating down relentlessly on a building construction site, where heavy machinery and workers were busy moving debris and waste from a dusty landfill. Amidst all the chaos and noise, Kevin P. McGowan, an archaeologist from the prestigious University of Illinois, was quietly and methodically sifting through the layers of refuse and debris, searching for any hidden artifacts or historical remnants. But little did he know that he was about to stumble upon something far more shocking and disturbing than he could ever have imagined. As his eyes sifted through the layers of debris, his trained eyes noticed something peculiar. There, buried neath the dusty landfill in Rockdale, Illinois, was a bone unlike any other in the pile. He felt a jolt of excitement as he carefully extracted it from the debris. His heart raced with anticipation. It was covered in dirt and grime, evidence of its long-forgotten existence. With a gentle hand, he wiped it clean, revealing its true shape and size. The bone seemed to tell a story of its own, whispering secrets of a time long past. But as he examined the bone more closely, he realized with growing horror that it was a human's bone. The archaeologist, along with his assistant, had stumbled upon the remains of a human body. According to the police, the remains were found at about 10:15 a.m. on September 3, 1978, several hundred yards northeast of Mound Road in Moan Avenue, on the outskirts of Rockdale. As his discovery sent shockwaves through the dusty landfill in Rockdale, he quickly called the sheriff's office, and the authorities were quick to respond. What started as a routine archaeological research in an unincorporated Joliet Township turned into a full-blown investigation when a human bone was discovered on the premises. The police, arriving at the scene in a flurry of activity, cordoned off the area to begin their investigation. It was apparent to investigators that they were dealing with a homicide case. It seemed that whoever buried the body underground was trying to conceal it from the world. The remains had been unceremoniously buried, hinting at a cruel and inhumane act. The investigators could tell that the victim had been murdered because only one bone was discovered, which means that the person would have been cut into pieces, and the other body parts would have been scattered at different places, adding a sense of urgency to their work. They were determined to uncover the truth behind this heinous crime, and the hunt for answers had begun. The stakes were high, and the weight of responsibility on their shoulders was immense, but they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. prompting law enforcement officials to launch a thorough investigation. Who was the deceased, and how did the person end up buried in the landfill? These were the questions on everyone's mind. The investigation was far from easy. It would take years of tireless work, countless interviews, and the latest scientific breakthroughs to solve the mystery. The officers stood around the partial remains of the body, their eyes locked onto the grisly sight mixed with curiosity and concern. It was clear that something had disturbed the rest of the body, and the officers couldn't help but wonder where the other body parts were. The scene was quickly secured and detectives were called to investigate further. With their experience and expertise, they hoped to uncover any additional skeletal remains that might provide vital clues to solving this macabre crime. Amidst the rubble and debris, the investigators painstakingly combed through the construction landfill, the layers of brick, stone, and wood. As they dug deeper, what they discovered became more gruesome and chilling. Skeletal remains, broken and fragmented, emerged from the debris. The source of this debris was traced back to the Rustcraft building, a massive 3-story structure with a full basement that once dominated the Juliet skyline. The investigators knew that they had their work cut out for them as they delved deeper into this bone-chilling discovery. In the world of forensic investigation, pathologists are the skilled professionals who meticulously examine the human body and its tissues to unravel the secrets of death. However, in the case of the unknown remains, authorities take a slightly different approach. Instead of a traditional pathologist examination, the remains undergo an anthropological examination. This fascinating field involves the study of human skeletal remains to determine age, gender, ancestry, and other characteristics that can help piece together the identity of the deceased. With only partial skeletal remains recovered, it was a daunting task to piece together the clues and unravel the secrets. They managed to glean some fascinating insights into the life of these mysterious bone fragments, revealing a glimpse of the past and perhaps even unlocking some secrets of the person's untimely demise. From just fragments of bones, pathologists were able to put together some fascinating details about the unknown person on October 14, 1997. The bones were of a woman. She was estimated to be in her youth, somewhere between the ages of 15 and 24 years old, with her entire life ahead of her. She stood between 5 and 5 foot 10 inches tall. Despite her incomplete remains, these details allowed them to imagine what this young woman might have been like in life and spark a sense of curiosity about her untold story. Without any identity to be followed, the person whose bones were found was given the name Rockdale's Jane Doe. Forensic pathologists were unable to determine any other distinguishing features about her appearance. Was she fair-skinned or olive-toned? Did she have auburn hair or jet black locks? The answers to these questions, like the woman herself, were buried in the ground and lost to time. Yet, despite the lack of information, the pathologists remained undaunted in their quest for answers, knowing that even the smallest detail could make all the difference in solving this perplexing case. As the investigators looked towards the timeline of events, a poignant realization dawned upon them. The unknown woman had likely lived and died in the years leading up to the demolition of the Rustcraft building in 1986. What was her life like during those tumultuous years, and what led to her untimely demise? The world around her was changing rapidly, with new technologies, cultural shifts, and political upheavals reshaping the landscape. Was she a witness to these changes, or was she struggling to survive amidst the chaos? As the investigators pondered these questions, they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness for the woman whose life had ended in such a tragic and mysterious manner. When they dug deeper into the history of the mysterious building, in whose rubble the remains were found, they uncovered a treasure trove of information that left them intrigued. It turns out that this ancient structure had been used by numerous companies since its inception in 1907. It was once a majestic factory, a towering structure, which was struck by disaster in 1992. The flames of a ferocious fire raged through the building for 2 long days, devouring everything in its path. The flames reached high into the sky, licking at the clouds like a vengeful beast, taunting the brave firefighters who fought bravely to contain the inferno. But their efforts were in vain, and the once magnificent factory was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. a solemn reminder of the destructive power of fire. Before its demise, the factory had become something of a heaven for the local homeless population. The building was far from safe, but for those who had nowhere else to go, it provided shelter from the elements. However, it was also known to be a hotbed of criminal activity, with nefarious characters lurking in the shadows. As the smoke cleared and the ashes settled, the city knew they had to act fast. The once towering factory had become a ticking time bomb, posing a threat to all who ventured near. With heavy hearts, the decision was made to demolish the building, but the question remained what to do with the rubble. A stroke of genius provided a solution that the debris should be carefully cleared, leaving behind a barren wasteland where the factory once stood. However, the remnants of the wreckage were not discarded, but rather repurposed. The basement of the factory was filled with the remains of the building, providing a solid foundation for what would come next. When they investigated further, they learned that in 1995, a curious decision was made to uproot the building's remains and relocate them to a new location in Rockdale, where the bone fragments were found. Their theory that the woman was killed elsewhere and then buried in this spot was confirmed when the pathologist informed them that the body of the unknown woman had been disturbed not once, but twice after death, suggesting that someone had been present at the original factory location. The mystery surrounding the woman's demise only deepened with this disturbing revelation. In 2009, hope emerged when the Will County coroner, Patrick K. O'Neill, formed a dedicated team to bring justice to the forgotten victim. The cold case unit embarked on an arduous journey, meticulously piecing together every detail of the case. Over the years, forensic anthropology studies were conducted. DNA was extracted and entered into the vast National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, NAMIs, and the profile was tirelessly searched in CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system. The team even turned to the latest in FBI technology, commissioning a specialized unit to create a facial reconstruction of the unknown woman. Yet each lead was pursued and ultimately eliminated, leaving the team with more questions than answers. On June 8, 2022, the Will County Coroner's Office teamed up with Othram, a forensic DNA sequencing laboratory, to solve the puzzling cold case of Rockdale's Jane Doe. Armed with cutting-edge technology and a determination to solve this long-standing riddle, the teams set out on their quest, but it wouldn't be easy. Previous attempts at DNA testing had failed, leaving little hope for a breakthrough. However, the Will County Coroner's Office was undeterred and even contributed funding to support the new round of testing. With advanced forensic DNA testing at their disposal, the team was determined to crack the case once and for all. And with the help of a crowdfund campaign that raised additional funds and support from the community, the team was finally able to move forward with their investigation. The stakes were high and the pressure was on, but the team was ready to do whatever it took to bring closure to this long-standing mystery. Kristen Middleman, the Chief Development Officer at Othram, knew the importance of identifying the perpetrators or victims of a crime. And that's exactly what Othram was able to do in this case. The experts at Othram were determined to crack the case, and they knew that advanced DNA testing was the key to unlocking the mystery of the unknown woman's identity. Through forensic-grade genome sequencing technology, they were able to extract key genetic information from the skeletal remains, enabling them to construct a comprehensive genealogical profile. But that was just the beginning. With dogged determination, the Othram's in-house genetic genealogy team then took over, tirelessly researching the family tree to create an investigative lead for law enforcement. Their dedication paid off, and the breakthrough they were hoping for finally emerged. The lab was able to uncover a match of possible relatives, providing the veteran investigators with a crucial lead. It was the moment they had been waiting for, the break in the case that could finally bring some closure to this unsolvable mystery. The investigation was far from over, but this breakthrough gave them renewed hope. Once the leads were returned to law enforcement, cold case investigators interviewed several people in Illinois, Texas, and California. After years of painstaking investigation, the answers finally came to them. Othram's advanced DNA testing had led them to a man in California named Christ O'Brien, who they believed could be the key to unlocking the mystery of the unidentified woman. Cold case investigators from the coroner's office quickly made their way to his house and interviewed him. and discovered that he had a sister who he had not seen since 1984. Could this missing sister be the unidentified woman they had been searching for all these years? To answer this question, they collected DNA from Christ O'Brien and sent it to the Othram labs for further testing, and the subsequent KINSNP testing confirmed that Christ and the identified woman were half-siblings. His long-lost sister had finally been found, thanks to the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the cutting-edge technology of Othram. On March 3, 2023, after 26 years of being a nameless victim in a cold case, the woman who had been found in the ruins of an Illinois factory in 1997 finally had a name: Marie R. O'Brien. Born in the charming town of Aurora on July 16, 1966, Marie was a daughter, sister, and friend to those who knew her. Elder brother Christ O'Brien was someone she looked up to and loved dearly. And though her life was tragically cut short, Marie's memory will now live on with dignity and warmth, as her loved ones can finally lay her to rest with a sense of closure. Marie R. O'Brien was a bright and cheerful student at Golden Rule Charter School, where her outgoing nature and friendly demeanor earned her many friends. Her trusting nature, however, often raised concern among those who cared about her. Her elder brother Christ O'Brien described her by saying that she often placed her trust in random strangers too easily, a trait that may have ultimately led to her tragic fate. Despite her brother's efforts to contact her after 1984, Marie disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a void in the lives of those who knew her. Marie R. O'Brien may have been a woman of few words, but her actions spoke volumes. Her community in Aurora knew her as a true gem, a kind-hearted soul who always put others first. From a young age, Marie's talents were evident to all. She was a creative force, and her passion for art was undeniable. Her paintings were breathtaking and were cherished by all who received them. But Marie's generosity extended far beyond her artistic talents. She was always willing to lend a helping hand, and her selfless nature was an inspiration to all those around her. It's no wonder that she was so well loved by her friends and family, who couldn't get enough of her infectious warmth and charming personality. Though her time was tragically cut short, Marie's legacy lives on through the lives she touched with her kindness and creativity. But the case is not yet solved. There are questions that still linger in the minds of Marie's loved ones. Who took her away from them? As they wait for justice to be served, they hold on to hope that the perpetrator will be caught and closure will finally be within reach. For Christ, Marie's older brother, the wait has been agonizing. Every day he wonders who could have done this to his beloved sister and why, but he remains determined to see the case through to its end, to bring peace to Maria's memory and justice to her name. The search for answers continues, and the family's faith in the investigative team never wavers. The case of Chris Watts, Shannon Razusek, and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris' parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Sean and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Sean and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed two daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Sean had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Sean defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Sean was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Sean was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Sean-Ann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Sean-Ann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Sean-Ann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Sean-Ann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Sean-Ann loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia DeRosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Sean-Ann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Sean-Ann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Sean-Ann was having a baby boy. Sean-Ann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Sean-Ann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina, while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Sean-Ann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece, without considering Sean-Ann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Sean-Ann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Sean-Ann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions and that Sean-Ann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Sean-Ann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Sean-Ann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Sean-Ann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Sean-Ann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Sean-Ann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Sean-Ann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Sean-Ann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Sean-Ann too much to do that. But Sean-Ann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Sean-Ann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Sean-Ann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Sean-Ann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Sean-Ann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Sean-Ann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Sean-Ann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shannon soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shannon opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shannon was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris' account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shannon returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shannon entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shannon's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shannon missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shannon, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shannon's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shannon's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shannon would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shannon's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shannon might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shannon's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shannon was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shannon and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shannon's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shannon and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shannon and Chris's home, the officer found Shannon's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shannon's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shannon's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. A camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannon's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shannon hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean and might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Sean and during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Sean and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean in. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held onto the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shanann was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shanann emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their 2 daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. The crime took place in Green Bay, a city in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, located on the shore of Lake Michigan. With a population of around 104,000 people, it is the third largest city in the state. Known for its strong football culture, Green Bay is home to the Green Bay Packers, one of the most successful teams in the National Football League. The city has a diverse economy, with industries including healthcare, education, manufacturing, and tourism. Visitors to Green Bay can explore attractions such as the National Railroad Museum, Bay Beach Amusement Park, and the historic downtown district. It was here in Green Bay that a tragic murder took place in 1986. On April 18, 1964, a bright-eyed baby girl was born. Her name was Lisa Holstead. Raised by a strong, resilient single mother named Judith Karen Pearl Thompson, Lisa's childhood was not without its challenges. Her father, Frank Holstead, was absent from her life, but that didn't stop Lisa from shining bright. From an early age, she exhibited a curious mind and a creative spirit that defined her life. She grew up with two loving older sisters, Deborah, who was 3 years older, and Susan, who was 2 years older than Lisa. They were always there for her, to lend a listening ear or as a shoulder to cry on. Lisa felt a sense of security and warmth with them that could not be easily replicated. Her older brother, Stephen Holstead, who was 5 years older than her, was her protector and always looked out for his little sister and made sure she felt safe and loved. Despite the financial struggles of being raised by a single mother, their love for each other was unwavering. Judith worked tirelessly to provide for her children, and her love for them knew no bounds. Lisa Holstead had a passion for horseback riding and was also artistic and sketched during her spare time. However, her life took an unexpected turn when she got pregnant at the age of 17 and gave birth to her beloved son, Jeremy, in 1981. Despite the challenges she faced, Lisa was a loving and devoted mother who doted on her son. She worked tirelessly to ensure that Jeremy had the best life possible. Her kind, outgoing, and creative personality shone through as she raised Jeremy on her own, just like her own mother had raised her and her siblings. Lisa Holstead was a woman of courage and independence. Despite the comfort of living with her family, she yearned for something more. So, she made the brave decision to move across the country to Los Angeles to pursue her dreams in 1981. After some time, she realized that what she truly wanted was a stable and peaceful life for her and her son, Jeremy. She found that in the town of Green Bay in Wisconsin, where they settled and made a home in 1982. While she never attended college, Lisa was determined to continue her education and took a goal-oriented, non-credit adult learning course at the Northeastern Wisconsin Technical Institute between 1983 and 1984. By the time she returned to Green Bay in 1986, Lisa was only 22 years old, but she had already accomplished so much. With her son by her side, who was now 5 years old, she was ready to take on whatever challenges came her way in this new chapter of their lives. She had even found love again with a man named John Sott, with whom she shared a cozy home in Green Bay. The couple enjoyed simple pleasures like fishing and playing darts together, and even had a quirky collection of pets, an eel and a bird named Herbie. Lisa's love for her family and her zest for life were evident in everything she did, and she cherished every moment spent with her loved ones. However, fate had a cruel twist in store for her, and her bright future was tragically cut short. On August 12, 1986, the moon was high in the sky in Wisconsin as Lisa and John embarked on a late-night adventure. Lisa and John seemed to be having a great time, their competitive spirits shining through as they played game after game of darts. But as that night came to a close, tension began to rise, and the alcohol seemed to take its toll. When they were driving back home, the car came to a stop at the intersection of Mason and Taylor Street at 2:30 a.m. Lisa and John had been having an argument, and she opened the door and stepped out in the cool night air. The argument with John had left her feeling frustrated and upset, and she needed to clear her head. She told John that she would walk home and that he could go ahead and get some rest. He hoped that she would come back soon and that they could make up and put this argument behind them. As the hours passed and the sun began to rise over the quiet town of Green Bay, John's worry grew into a gnawing sense of dread. Lisa still hadn't returned, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He scoured the streets and alleys, calling out her name, but there was no response. Desperately, he made his way to the police station and reported her missing, and his heart was heavy with fear and uncertainty. After just an hour of John reporting her missing, a gruesome discovery was made by two unsuspecting workers in the Kenures Nature Park. It was an ordinary day for the workers as they made their way along the riverbank. Something caught their eye, a hand jutting out from the water's surface. Intrigued, they pulled their truck to a stop and approached the water's edge. What they found there would haunt them forever. The lifeless body of a woman lying partially unclothed, as if she had been cast aside like an unwanted object. They immediately called the authorities, and within minutes, the officers from the Green Bay Police Department arrived at the scene and were met with a gruesome sight. The unknown woman's lifeless body lay in the marsh, surrounded by tall reeds and murky water. The detectives tried to secure the area to gather any evidence. As the detectives combed through the marsh in search of any clues that could lead them to the woman's identity, they stumbled upon a small piece of fabric poking out from under the murky waters. With a sense of urgency, they waded through the marsh to retrieve the fabric, and upon closer inspection, they discovered an identity card hidden in the back pocket of a pair of jeans. It was then that they were able to confirm the victim's identity as Lisa Holstead. When they approached her body, they saw the telltale marks on her neck, grim evidence that she had been strangled to death, and the case was ruled as a homicide. The autopsy report delivered a gruesome account of Lisa's final moments. Her blood alcohol level was found to be sky-high, clocking in at a staggering 0.25%, well beyond the legal limit at that time. The autopsy further revealed that she had suffered from multiple wounds that left her body streaked with blood, a sight that could haunt even the bravest of souls. Worse still, the medical examiner's findings pointed to a heinous sexual assault as the primary cause of her death. The only hope they had was the foreign DNA sample that they had managed to extract from the victim's body. The discovery of the DNA was like finding a needle in a haystack for the police. They knew it was a crucial piece of evidence, but they didn't have a suspect to match it to. The tiny sample was carefully stored away like a precious gemstone. The detectives hoped that someday, technology would catch up to the potential of this evidence and give them the answers they desperately sought. The news of Lisa's death spread like wildfire, leaving a trail of grief in its wake. Her boyfriend John was shattered by the loss of the woman he loved, racked with guilt for the final argument, and haunted by the fact that he could have done more to keep her safe. Her family was plunged into a world of pain and confusion. The police moved swiftly to investigate, interviewing everyone who might have had a motive to harm Lisa. Detectives followed up on every lead, questioned every suspect, and revisited the crime scene numerous times in the years that followed, but nothing seemed to break the case wide open. They even went back to the drawing board numerous times, piecing together any possible lead or hint that could lead to the identity of Lisa's killer. But their efforts were met with dead ends. The passage of time only seemed to add another layer of obscurity to the case. Evidence deteriorated and potential suspects slipped out of sight. The case was eventually archived and sat gathering dust on a shelf for over 30 years. But in 2020, after 34 years of the case lying cold, hope again flickered as Detective David Graff from the GBPD reopened the case and took the lead in the investigation. With dogged determination, he and his team combed through the old case files, and their eyes fell upon a small vial, forgotten in the back of the storage unit. Inside was the key to unlocking the case, the DNA of the perpetrator. It was time to bring in the latest forensic technology behind her brutal murder. He reached out to a pioneer in the space, a company specializing in forensic genetic genealogy, hoping to unlock the secrets of the killer's identity. This cutting-edge technology would not only reveal more about the suspect, but also provide a fascinating insight into the killer's familial connections. With this new knowledge, the detective was finally able to unravel the twisted web of this cold case. The DNA was sent for analysis in June 2020, and when the results came back from the lab, the Green Bay Police Department found themselves with a wealth of information about their suspect. With every bit of information gleaned from the DNA analysis, the police were one step closer to the killer. The police started carefully tracing the family trees of distant relatives of the person. Piece by piece, they constructed a web of connections until they had built 10 to 15 different family trees. As the investigation progressed, they scoured databases and websites to find groups of people who could potentially be related to the victim. After much investigation and digging, they stumbled upon a group of individuals living in other states. Following their trail, they found a connection to Wisconsin, and finally, the trail led them to Green Bay, the very place where the brutal murder took place. The police found a family member who had been living in Green Bay in 1986, the same year the crime was committed. Finally, after countless hours of work, they found a suspect whose DNA potentially matched the sample taken at the crime scene. The long-awaited breakthrough had come at last. The man was Luke Griffin, and investigators found that Luke already had a history of violence against women, including strangulation, and had been released on parole from the Green Bay Correctional Institution, where he had been serving time for the heinous crime of second-degree sexual assault. What shocked them the most was that Luke had a previous conviction for sexual assault in 1981, a fact that had gone unnoticed during the initial investigation. It seemed that the police had missed a vital clue that had been right in front of them all this time. However, thanks to the groundbreaking technology of forensic genetic genealogy and the tireless work of Detective David Graff and his team, Luke's past finally caught up with him. With a suspect in their sights, the investigators knew they had to be absolutely certain before making an arrest. They needed to test Luke Griffin's DNA against the profile from the crime scene. So, in September 2020, the police embarked on a thrilling mission to track down their prime suspect, Luke Griffin, who had moved to the city of Racine. The Green Bay detectives joined forces with the Racine County authorities, the FBI, and DCI to put Griffin under surveillance, hoping to uncover evidence against him. The hunt was on for Luke, and the authorities were not going to let him out of their sights. They trailed him to another town in Wisconsin, watching his every move. On September 18, 2020, while they were watching him, they saw him disposing of some beer cans in a dumpster and carelessly tossing a cigarette butt on the ground. Little did he know that these seemingly insignificant acts would lead to his undoing. The discarded items were quickly collected by the police and sent back to the lab for further DNA testing. The results came back on September 29, 2020, and the authorities were ecstatic. The DNA was a perfect match to that found at the crime scene over 3 decades ago. On October 28, 2020, at around 6 a.m., there was the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. As Luke was escorted out of his home, neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering amongst themselves as the police car drove away with Luke to Brown County Jail. In the interrogation room, Luke sat stone-faced as he denied any involvement in the murder. When the questioning intensified, Luke's resolve began to waver, and he finally confessed to having a sexual encounter with the victim. But he claimed that his memory of that night was hazy at best, citing intoxication with drugs and alcohol as the reason for his confusion. As the details of the crime unfolded, it became clear that Luke's intoxication had clouded his memory, and he was unable to recall the events that led to Lisa's death. The once elusive suspect was now in custody. In 2021, it was time for his trial. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members of the victim, and curious onlookers as Luke Griffin entered flanked by guards. All eyes were on him as he took his seat at the defendant's table. Luke's fate hung in the balance as the trial began, and the prosecution presented their evidence. The jury listened intently, absorbing every detail of the case. Luke recounted the events of that fateful night in 1986 and told the jury that he had simply stopped at McDonald's and then taken a route that happened to pass by the spot where Lisa's body was later discovered. But with every word he spoke, the weight of the crime he committed seemed to hang heavier on his shoulders. As the trial went on, the evidence against him continued to mount, until finally the jury was left with no choice but to make a decision, and Luke was booked on a first-degree homicide charge, and his bail was set at $1 million. After a long and grueling legal battle, on January 27, 2023, Luke made a dramatic decision to plead no contest to the charge of homicide by reckless conduct. Again, the courtroom was tense as the judge read out the verdict, and Peter Hain, one of Luke's attorneys, argued for a more lenient sentence, citing Luke's poor health and the 2 years he had already spent in jail. However, Judge Timothy Hinkfuss was on move by Hain's request, stating that Luke's lack of accountability and failure to take responsibility had only continued to victimize Holstead's family. Hinkfuss went on to explain that the sentence he was able to give was limited by the laws in place at the time of the crime, and that current Wisconsin law only allows for a maximum of 40 years for homicide by reckless conduct, a Class C felony. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as Luke was found guilty of the crime and was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. It was a bittersweet victory for the prosecution, who had worked tirelessly to bring justice for their victim's family. On March 27, 2023, 67-year-old Luke Griffin was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the maximum penalty available under the law in 1986. Under the old sentencing law, Luke can be released after serving 2/3 of his sentence. He was also granted 2.5 years of time served, which means he could be released in 4.5 years and is eligible for parole in less than 6 months. The legal battle surrounding the case had been intensely fought since 2020, according to the Brown County Circuit Court Judge Timothy Hinkfuss. When delivering the sentence, Judge Hinkfuss acknowledged that Lisa Holstead's murder was a despicable and heinous act, but was constrained by the laws in effect at the time of the crime. Despite acknowledging the maximum sentence was woefully inadequate, Brown County District Attorney David Lassie called for it to be imposed, citing the severity of the crime and its impact on the victim's family. He failed to take accountability and avoided justice for 34 years. Lassie said, "The impact that has had on the family is significant. The family members' emotional impact was evident through the hearing, and they made it clear that no sentence could bring back their beloved Lisa." The courtroom was filled with emotion when 5 of Holstead's family members stood before the judge to deliver their witness statements. Their voices trembled with grief and anger when they recounted the pain and trauma they had endured for over 3 decades. One sister, a brother, a niece, a son, and a granddaughter all spoke passionately, sharing the impact the long, cold case had on their family. They described the void left by their beloved sister, mother, and grandmother, and expressed their disappointment with the maximum sentence available. Stephen Holstead's, Lisa's brother's voice was thick with emotion as he addressed the man who had caused his family so much pain. "The pain it caused our family cannot even be described to you," he said, his eyes fixed on Luke. "Many tears. I have thought about Lisa all these years. Every day. It's been 13,377 days since you murdered her." They painted a picture of a kind and loving woman, a devoted mother to her young son. The family spoke of Lisa's creative spirit, her love for art and music, and her trusting and outgoing nature. They shared that they had few photos of Lisa and no videos, but one family member brought a framed picture of her to the stand, and another played an audio recording of her singing as a child. The case of Lisa Holstead is a testament to the power of perseverance and the remarkable advances in forensic technology that have been made in recent years. While it may have seemed like an unsolvable mystery for decades, the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the use of cutting-edge forensic techniques ultimately led to justice being served. What sentence do you think Luke deserves for his crime? Humans are inherently doubtful and covetous beings. When confronted with perfection, their instinct is to seek out imperfections. In the absence of any, they often endeavor to fabricate them. The calamity to be recounted today was observed by a vast audience, yet no one was able to assist the seemingly flawless girl, who as a result became handicapped. Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Chinese Harvard, was hosting a distinguished performance in partnership with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. This event held significant prominence. Gracefully attired pairs made their entrance into the majestic theater, men in impeccably cut black suits adorned with gleaming cufflinks, and women in stunning full-length gowns clutching petite handbags. They exchanged smiles and engaged in polite conversations as they proceeded to their seats. Tsinghua University students poised to showcase their talent that evening faced immense pressure. One student, Zhu Ling, was confronting an especially daunting challenge. She was about to deliver a 6-minute solo poised to be the defining 6 minutes of her life. The audience potentially included professors, prospective future employers, and benefactors, all key figures for her career prospects, heightening the stakes. Any error or mishap was not an option. She needed to captivate them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. Her goal was to immerse herself in the rhythm and embody the essence of the ancient Chinese musical instrument, the jichuan. Revered as the instrument of the wise and favored by literati and intellectuals, those who mastered it were invariably seen as genial and perceptive. The jichuan, a symbol of prestige, boasts a rich history. One of these venerable instruments from the Song dynasty fetched $22 million, ranking it among the most valuable. To soothe Ling's nerves, numerous friends positioned themselves near the stage, their anxiety nearly matching hers, having witnessed all she had endured over the past 2 months. For this moment, Zhu Lingling's entire existence up to now had been devoted to these 6 minutes. She had almost jeopardized her well-being for this event. Her nerves were so frayed that in 3 days preceding her solo, she scarcely consumed any food. Stress-induced stomach pains plagued her, and sleep was elusive, making it hard for her to keep her eyes. Her vision began to blur. Finally, Zhu Lingling ascended the stage, greeted the audience with a bow, sat down, and commenced playing the jichuan. In those initial moments, her friends held their breath, but soon the tension eased, and they found themselves enveloped in the music. Zhu Lingling's stage presence that evening betrayed no sign of her nerves. She seemed to become one with the melody. Her hands glided effortlessly, coaxing out exquisite sounds that resonated throughout the theater. Some of her friends were even brought to tears. It appeared that Zhu Lingling had channeled all her accumulated stress and anxiety of the past 2 months into her performance, transforming it into a form of emotional release. As the 6 minutes concluded, the audience burst into applause. Zhu Lingling gave a deep bow, offered a smile, and exited the stage. Unbeknownst to her, her best friend was in the crowd smiling broadly and clapping so vigorously that her hands turned red. Yet her expression also showed a hint of nervousness. That night, Zhu Lingling opted out of the festivities to return home and rest. The dissipation of stress left her feeling utterly drained. In the shower, she began washing her hair calmly. Glancing at her hand, she noticed a clump of hair passing through it. Running her hand through her hair again brought a sense of urgency. She pulled back the shower curtain and dashed to the mirror. Her reflection revealed an exhausted face and small, irregular bald spots resembling the aftermath of a carelessly wielded razor. This was merely the onset. In the following weeks, Zhu Lingling's condition would deteriorate further, leaving her confined to a wheelchair and bereft of ability, unable to move, speak, or even control facial muscles. She transformed from a highly promising Tsinghua University student into someone with the cognitive capacity of a 6-year-old child. This entire wasn't an illness, nor was it a genetic anomaly. Zhu Ling was experiencing something caused by another individual. For ordinary students, gaining admission to Harvard was more likely than to Tsinghua, especially for those native to China. The local acceptance rate stands at a mere 0.4%, making it more accessible to international students. The university operates on an annual budget of $5 billion. It's an institution where influential political figures' daughters and wealthy businessmen's sons receive their education. Each of them is exceptionally intelligent and well-educated, with high intellectual capacities. The real challenge isn't just in securing admission, it's surviving the intense competition and rivalry among the students. Some alumni have admitted that to stay at the forefront, they engaged in various manipulations, betraying comrades, engaging in deceit, and stabbing others in the back, all driven by the unyielding competitive spirit fostered at this institution. In 1994, Zhu Ling was among the 31 chemistry undergraduates at Tsinghua University. She ranked in the top 3 of her cohort, which consisted of 20 males and 11 females. Zhu Ling was often regarded as the epitome of excellence, the cream of the crop among students. Indeed, Zhu Ling was not only intelligent, but also tall and striking in appearance. Everyone foresaw a bright future for her, destined for significant accomplishments. Zhu Ling also had a charismatic and assured presence. Her arrival in the dormitory sparked envy among others. She had a knack for attracting a circle of friends and admirers, thanks to her warm demeanor towards others. She roamed the campus, attended lectures diligently, completed her assignments, and many marveled at her seemingly boundless energy. However, after a few months, a peculiar and unexplainable decline in Zhu Ling's condition began to be observed by all. She appeared less strained, even during graduation week. But suddenly, Zhu Ling seemed to vanish. She began arriving later than her peers and consistently looked exhausted in lectures. Sitting there, she'd sweat as if overheating. Zhu Ling struggled to concentrate on the class content. Severe stomach pain plagued her, leading many, including her instructors, to believe it was related. Seeking relief, Zhu Ling went to the school clinic for pain relievers, but they provided minimal respite. What started as minor lateness escalated to her ceasing classes entirely. Concerned friends decided to visit her dormitory, which she shared with 3 other girls. They found her in bed, shivering and moaning in agony, with clumps of dark hair scattered on the pillow. Alarmed, her classmates urged her to consult a physician, but Zhu Ling dismissed their concerns. She insisted she was merely stressed and would return to classes the next day, assuring them that everything would normalize by semester's end. The once impeccable Zhu Ling was now unrecognizable. Her complexion had turned ghostly pale, lips took on a purplish tint. She resembled a specter haunting the campus. Her movements were sluggish. Each step seemed to inflict excruciating pain. Most of her hair had shed, leaving her nearly bald and compelling her always to wear something on her head for concealment. Occasionally, Zhu Ling's vision would blur, leading to temporary blindness for hours at a time. Various hypotheses regarding Zhu Ling's deteriorating condition spread across campus. Some conjectured it might be due to cancer or alopecia, known for causing hair loss or perhaps an autoimmune disorder. Yet darker speculations emerged. Many students linked Zhu Ling's decline to stress stemming from a dispute with her close friend Sunny. It seemed oddly coincidental that the change in Zhu Ling coincided with their falling out. After missing an orchestra rehearsal for a challenging piece, Zhu Ling faced unexpectedly harsh criticism. Sunny Fly informed the instructor that Zhu Ling had skipped because she felt overly skilled, implying the others needed to elevate their abilities to match hers. Realizing such maliciousness in real life was quite overwhelming for Zhu Ling. Different speculations circulated among university students. Some hinted that Zhu Ling, being a chemistry student, might be secretly conducting groundbreaking experiments. However, would a highly driven student risk self-harm? Beijing A, from Peking University, and a friend since middle school, decided to visit her in the hospital with a fruit basket. On entering her room, Beijing was stunned and compelled to flee. It wasn't fear of infection, but rather seeing his classmate in such a dire state that overwhelmed him. How could a vibrant 20-year-old transform into this shadow so quickly? What illness could strip Zhu Ling of all she had worked for? The medical team found her condition baffling. Just months earlier, Zhu Ling had been in peak health. Now she lay almost hairless, connected to multiple machines with tubes protruding from her nose and mouth. Her body convulsed and face showed partial paralysis. A look of silent desperation marked her wide eyes. The sight was distressing. Even the slightest touch caused excruciating pain and more erratic movements. It seemed even her hospital gown tormented her skin. Sensing his friend's silent plea for help, Beijing read the desperate message in her eyes, a look he would never forget. Seeking answers alongside Zhu Ling's parents, Beijing probed the doctors for a diagnosis, but they were equally perplexed. They delved into the onset of her illness. Initially, about a month or 2 earlier, Zhu Ling experienced stomach aches, resembling spasms which came and went unpredictably within a week. The pain intensified to the point that it forced her to bend over in agony. Often, she would lay on the ground curled up in a fetal position. Initially, her remedy involved consuming large amounts of Chinese herbal tea. Yet the pain escalated, eventually causing her to lose consciousness. Zhu Ling, burdened by her demanding university schedule, delayed seeking medical attention, hoping the symptoms would subside. Then, her vision began failing intermittently, first blurring and then completely vanishing for hours. Subsequently, her hair started falling out, an especially traumatic symptom for any young woman. The situation deteriorated further, leading to her hospitalization just days before Christmas. It was her first time in hospital care. During that month, Her parents remained steadfast by her side as she received treatment. The medical team tested her for arsenic and mercury poisoning, however, the results showed nothing abnormal. Intriguingly, a doctor from a different hospital recalled a similar poisoning case from the 1960s and suggested the possibility of thallium poisoning. However, Zhu Lingling denied any exposure to thallium in her studies. The hospital then reached out to Tsinghua University to investigate which chemical substances Zhu Lingling might have encountered in her capacity as a chemistry student. Despite this inquiry, her medical records revealed no exposure to chemicals that could trigger such symptoms. This left her condition an enigma to the medical staff. Remarkably, after a month, Zhu Ling's health appeared to improve, and she requested permission to resume her studies. She was eager to sit for exams and anxious not to waste the entire semester. Her parents were adamantly opposed to her returning to university, fearing that stress was the underlying cause of her illness. Yet Zhu Ling feigned significant recovery and went back to classes in February. Unfortunately, by March, her condition had deteriorated dramatically again, resulting in readmission to the hospital, this time so debilitated that continued university attendance seemed impossible. She couldn't even speak. Jean, disillusioned with the local medical community's inability to provide answers, took the initiative. He reached out to medical experts not just in China but globally. Zhu Ling's symptoms were translated various languages, and he posted these on specialized medical forums online. In less than half an hour, he received his response. Over the next few days, around 2,000 emails poured in from 18 different countries. The respondents weren't mere internet users. Many were affiliated with national medical institutions and specialized in toxicology. The consensus among almost all of them was alarming. Thallium poisoning. The symptoms pointed to a deliberate, methodical attempt to poison Zhu Ling, designed to inflict slow, excruciating agony. Thallium, a dense and highly poisonous metal, was once used in rat poisons, but has been banned in major countries including China and the USA. In the early 20th century, it was used as a lice treatment known to cause hair loss. Its array of symptoms is so vast that it often leads to misdiagnosis by doctors, and its detection is usually alarmingly delayed. Thallium doesn't leave visible marks like bruises or wounds, making it harder to spot. The poisoning unfolds in stages. Initial stomach discomfort escalates to severe pain, then trembling, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. Subsequently, the victim experiences intense skin pain, akin to severe burns, where even the slightest touch feels excruciating. Clothing and bed linens become sources of torment. The final stage involves neurological symptoms, including involuntary motor disturbances, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis, culminating in cognitive decline and mental impairment. Tragically, in Zhu Ling's case, this meant a regression from a top student at China's most prestigious university to possessing the mental capacities of a 6-year-old child. BG Zhen, in collaboration with Zhu Ling's parents, sifted through the multitude of emails and promptly conveyed their findings to Zhu Ling's medical team. Yet the doctors were skeptical of the diagnosis posited by online contributors. They emphasized that detecting thallium in the body without specific tests was not feasible. Testing for thallium involved sending the patient's blood to a lab equipped for such an analysis. Moreover, they pointed out that thallium is a rare, tightly controlled substance, not easily obtainable. The doctors also mentioned that if Zhu Ling's condition was indeed due to thallium poisoning, an antidote would likely be ineffective at this advanced stage of the disease. This revelation left Zhu Ling's family and friends in shock. The pressing question then became, who would want to harm Zhu Ling? A hypothesis emerged that the intended targets might have been her parents, given their high-profile occupations. Her father was a senior engineer at the national agency, a position that could involve sensitive information. Her mother was an engineer at a prominent Chinese company. However, this line of inquiry eventually reached a dead end. The primary task was to determine how the poison entered Zhu Ling's system, especially since no one else on campus exhibited similar symptoms. This ruled out the possibility of thallium vapors, suggesting that Zhu Ling either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, during Zhu Ling's hospitalization, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included her shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, bath soap, and even her water glass. Intriguingly, the perpetrator seemed solely interested in Zhu Ling's possessions, an unusual incident in such a prestigious university's dormitory. With no surveillance cameras on campus at that time, an investigation was imperative. Students lived in gender-specific rooms, and access to the women's dormitory was restricted to current female students of Singer University. Neither alumni nor graduate students or professors had entry into the living quarters of over 100 young female students. Police initiated a thorough investigation into over 20 vendors known to supply thallium, a substance still used in manufacturing optical lenses, electronics, and other products. Scrutinizing their procurement records, they discovered that one supplier had provided alum to Tsinghua University's chemistry department for research. The investigation revealed that only a select group within the university had access to this compound: 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 senior undergraduates. Consequently, the perpetrator likely had a role in thallium-based experiments and had the opportunity to take personal items from Zhu Ling's room. As the investigation progressed, the professors and graduate students were quickly excluded as suspects due to their lack of access to the women's dormitory. This narrowed suspicion to the 2 senior students, 1 male and 1 female. Since the male student couldn't have entered the female residence area, suspicion fell on the female student. Astonishingly, this student was none other than Sun Wei, also known as Sunny. She was not only Zhu Ling's best friend and roommate, but now the prime suspect in her attempted murder. The situation posed a question. Why would Sunny, with a bright future ahead, risk everything in such a serious manner? Acquaintances of both young women mentioned that Zhu Ling had recently triumphed over Sunny in the student elections. Sunny was not known for tolerating defeat gracefully. She possessed an argumentative nature and had deceived her closest companion on several occasions. As Zhu Ling advanced and received greater acclaim, Sunny grew progressively more agitated. Zhu Ling's individual performance at the Beijing Philharmonic served as a catalyst for tension in their relationship. Zhu Ling was attractive, highly skilled, and esteemed by both peers and faculty members alike. This probably fueled Sunny's jealousy even more. Sun Wei was questioned for 8 hours straight before her parents came to take her home. Her family had significant influence at Tsinghua University. Her father played a key role in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee, and her grandfather was a former vice chairman. Many of her relatives held positions in government or academic roles at top state universities. Consequently, Zhu Ling's case remained unresolved for quite some time. Sun Wei, one of the primary individuals associated with the incident, maintained her innocence. She claimed that the police had cleared her of any suspicion. Regardless, Sun Wei legally changed her name and birth date, married an American, and relocated to the US, where she lived without restrictions. Meanwhile, Ling's diagnosis came too late. It was eventually confirmed that thallium had caused her mysterious illness. By the time it was detected, the levels of thallium in her body were extraordinarily high. The antidote, Prussian blue, proved ineffective due to the advanced stage of poisoning. Ling was declared permanently disabled with irreversible nerve damage. She now has a child's mental capacity, experiences facial paralysis, and is bound to a wheelchair. Later on, Ling's family received $14,000 from the hospital due to misdiagnosis and mishandling of her case. The closure of the case by the police occurred quietly without notifying Ling's family, which only added to their tragedy and suspicions. Zhu Ling lived until she was 50 years old before passing away. Her parents found solace in the fact that she could live so long in such a state. Unfortunately, the individual responsible for her condition was never brought to justice. It was a dreary day on October 26, 1998, when a chilling discovery was made along the banks of the Columbia River. A body was discovered floating near Lower River Road in Vancouver, sending shockwaves through the local community. Authorities were quick to respond to the scene, hoping to uncover the identity of the unfortunate soul who had met their untimely demise. As they approached the body, they were hit with the pungent smell of decay, a telltale sign that the man had been in the water for a considerable amount of time. With no obvious clues as to who the man was, they carefully removed the body from the water and transported him out of the area to begin the arduous process of identification and autopsy. Little did they know that this was the start of a mystery that would continue to weigh on their minds for years to come. As the medical examiner's office began the process of an autopsy on the unidentified man's body, a chilling truth emerged. The autopsy revealed he had died from a gunshot wound to the head. But as investigators pored over the evidence, they were left with more questions than answers. Had the man taken his own life? Had someone else pulled the trigger? The truth remained shrouded in uncertainty. But that wasn't all. It was believed that the man had been in the water for anywhere from 6 months to a year, and this left authorities scrambling to piece together a timeline of events leading up to his tragic end. Despite the passage of time, the medical examiner's office was also able to estimate the man's age at the time of his death, putting him at around 53 years old. These findings only deepened the mystery surrounding the case. Who was this man, and how had he met such a grisly end? The investigators faced a daunting challenge in their quest to uncover the truth behind the man's tragic end. They knew they had to first identify who he was, but it was a task easier said than done, for the man had been found with no means of identification, leaving authorities with no starting point. The investigators turned to the records of missing persons in the area, hoping to find a lead, but their search came up empty, leaving them with no idea who the remains could have belonged to. Desperate for answers, they cast a wider net, notifying agencies throughout the Northwest in the hopes that someone, somewhere, could identify the unknown victim. Despite their tireless efforts, however, their search proved fruitless. Another thing that could have helped investigators in uncovering the man's identity was fingerprints. However, the hope of this was dashed due to the advanced state of decomposition of the body. As days turned into weeks, the investigation seemed to be hitting a brick wall. Frustration began to set in as the investigators were no closer to solving the mystery of the man's identity or his untimely demise. He remained an unknown John Doe, a haunting reminder of the many unanswered questions surrounding the case. Despite their best effort, the case gradually slipped into obscurity, another mystery in a world full of them. The investigators had done all they could, but the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. The passage of time can sometimes be a double-edged sword when it comes to solving cold cases. While it may seem like hope fades with each passing year, the truth is that new technology and advancements in forensic science can breathe new life into a case once thought to be unsolvable. In 2008, the investigators working on the case decided to take a fresh look at the evidence, armed with the latest forensic tools and techniques. They reached out to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, hoping that the advancements in DNA profiling would finally lead them to the answers they so desperately sought. The University of North Texas Center for Human Identification was able to develop a DNA profile of the unidentified male from samples taken during the autopsy. The DNA profile was a ray of hope for investigators, who wasted no time in submitting it to the National DNA Database, eagerly waiting for a match. But despite their best efforts, no match was found. The DNA profile had given them a new lead to follow, but it also reminded them of just how difficult it can be to solve a case with no definitive clues. Still, the investigators refused to give up hope. They knew that with each new development in the field of forensic science, the chance of finally unlocking the mystery of the man found in the river grew ever greater. After years of the unidentified man's case going cold, investigators were determined to finally uncover the truth. Around 2021, they decided to take a fresh approach and submitted a DNA sample from the remains to a renowned forensic DNA laboratory in Virginia, Bode Technology. With their expertise in extracting DNA from challenging samples, the scientists at Bode Technology eagerly took on the challenge. They knew that by analyzing the DNA sample, they could unlock the secrets to the identity of this mysterious John Doe. A forensic genealogist used DNA from the remains to trace the person's ancestry. Through meticulous research and comparison, the forensic genealogist discovered an ancestral link to a family from California. The lead was promising, and the genealogist pointed to one person in particular, the son of Chelsea Johnson Jr. and Ruth Marie Henson. Interestingly, This individual named Michael Johnson had no traceable activities since 1998. The investigators knew they had struck gold and were now one step closer to finally unraveling the identity of the mysterious John Doe. And so, as the autumn leaves fell in October 2022, Nikki Costa, the operations manager of the medical examiner's office, made a breakthrough in the case of the unidentified man. Nikki managed to track down Chelsea and Ruth Johnson's other children, Russell Johnson and Kathy Bergen, and they revealed some startling information. Apparently, their brother Michael had disappeared without a trace over 2 decades ago and had cut off all contact with the family. Could this be the missing link that investigators had been searching for all these years? Nikki was bent on solving the case of the unidentified man. She tirelessly pursued the lead that the DNA sample belonged to Michael. To confirm her suspicions, Nikki reached out to multiple agencies determined to find the missing piece of the puzzle. The California Department of Justice Missing Persons DNA program provided analysis of family reference samples, while the Wasatch County Sheriff's Office collected a DNA sample from Johnson's sister Kathy. Meanwhile, the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification sent its DNA profile, which was developed in 2008, to California's Missing Persons Program for comparison. With all the evidence gathered, Clark County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Martha Burt, finally concluded that the unidentified man was indeed Michael. Nikki's persistence and the collaborative efforts of multiple agencies had finally given the man a name and a chance at justice. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Michael's death remain a puzzle to investigators, who have yet to uncover any information about his activities leading up to the discovery of his body. Nevertheless, the discovery of his identity was a huge breakthrough in the case, giving investigators a starting point to unravel the mystery. Now authorities are reaching out to the public for help, hoping that someone might come forward with information that could shed light on what happened to Michael. Every little bit of information could make a difference, and authorities are eager to get to the bottom of this perplexing case. Case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born in Portland on June 12, 1975. Shortly after, her parents relocated to Federal Way, a suburb of Seattle, where she grew up with 2 siblings, forming a strong bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, Sarah demonstrated a keen interest in music and ballet, spending considerable time honing her skills. Her academic prowess earned her a spot in a school program that allowed her to travel to New Zealand twice. As she entered her teenage years, Sarah joined the cheerleading team at her high school, where she developed a large social circle. She was renowned for her kind and compassionate nature, often lending a helping hand to those in need. On Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team at the school building, where a bus would pick them up for an event. She drove her father's car to the school, but arrived at the wrong time, thinking the bus would arrive at 8 a.m., when it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends gradually arrived at the meeting point, they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. Even when the bus arrived, Sarah was still missing. Her friends found this strange, but they had no way to contact her since they didn't have mobile phones at the time. Around the same time, 2 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds when they noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes, took a breath and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't pay much attention and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman lying unresponsive on the ground, who they thought might be dead. The children rushed back home to tell their parents, and one of the children's parents returned to the scene with them. Meanwhile, the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child remembered seeing a car that resembled a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area, and since he lived near the school, his father decided to try to locate that car. After a while, he spotted a similar car, but unfortunately, he quickly lost sight of it and was unable to find it again. At the same time, the parents of the other child rushed to the school, where they discovered the young woman lying on the ground, likely dead. They promptly entered the school building and contacted the police. Upon arrival, the officers confirmed the young woman's death. They also quickly identified her as Sarah. The police deduced that the victim had been strangled based on the marks on her neck. Some of her personal belongings, including her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found nearby. However, her purse and car keys were discovered in the school parking lot, leading investigators to suspect that the assailant might have attacked her near her vehicle and then dragged her behind the trees. Body was sent to forensic experts for examination, and the police initiated their search for evidence. As a first step, they interviewed everyone who was in the school premises and its surrounding area. The two boys who discovered Sarah provided a rough description of the man who emerged from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall, approximately 20-year-old man with shoulder-length, reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black trousers. Soon, the police located another witness, and this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A man out for a run observed a strange scene in the same wooded area. He saw a girl lying next to the bushes, with a man hovering over her. The girl was completely still, and the witness initially thought the couple was engaging in intimate behavior in that spot. However, when he ran back through the area in the opposite direction a few minutes later, both the man and the girl were still there in the same positions. At no point did he suspect that a serious crime was being committed. The witness, a recent immigrant to the United States from a different cultural background, was uncertain about typical behavior in the country. Despite this, he was able to provide the police with a rough description of the attacker, which matched the accounts given by the children who found Sarah's body. The police interviewed dozens of people who had been near the school, but no other useful information came to light. The medical examiners who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body determined that the cause of death was strangulation. It appeared that the attacker had used his own socks to strangle her. A severe head wound was also found, and experts believed that Sarah had lost consciousness due to this blow, which correlated with the runner's account of seeing her lying motionless on the ground. Forensic experts analyzed Sarah's clothing and discovered traces of male DNA on nearly all her garments. However, at that time, in 1991, there was no DNA database to match these samples against. So investigators had to rely on direct comparisons with DNA samples from specific suspects. Another significant finding was that although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor reported no signs of sexual assault on her body. Based on this information, investigators pieced together their own theory of what happened. Since Sarah had arrived at the school almost an hour early, and she was alone in the parking lot, it's likely that her attacker saw her, waited for her to leave the car, struck her on the head with an object, causing her to lose consciousness. The attacker then dragged her body behind some trees, where it was later found. The assailant removed some of her clothing, engaged in inappropriate acts, and eventually strangled her using her own socks. When the children who found Sarah's body reported the car, they thought the attacker had fled in. Detectives started searching for a Chevrolet Nova. They soon found one, but the driver proved to have an alibi. He had just delivered donuts that morning, and his DNA didn't match the DNA on Sarah's clothes. It seemed the kids had simply seen the car driving by and mistakenly assumed the killer was inside. In fact, none of them could recall for certain whether they had seen a man get into a car from the bushes. In the days that followed, police continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but made no significant progress. Despite the horror of the event, classes resumed on Monday. The fact that the murder had occurred just a short distance from their school, and the killer remained at large with no known identity, added to the unease. Afraid to walk alone, the girls were escorted to their cars or buses by the boys from the sports teams, ensuring they weren't left alone on the street. Approximately 70 potential witnesses were present at the school and its surroundings on the morning of the incident. Investigators interviewed each of them, but unfortunately no new information came to light. Based on the accounts of the two children and the runner, a composite sketch of the attacker was created and circulated to local newspapers and television stations. The case received widespread media attention, and over the next few weeks, police received hundreds of testimony. Each tip was thoroughly investigated, but in every instance it led to a dead end. One promising lead involved a man who matched the suspect's description and had a criminal record. However, his DNA did not match the sample found on the victim's clothing, and the lead was eventually ruled out. The case remained stagnant for months, with the police dealing with a staggering 4,000 tips, but lacking the resources to effectively follow up on each one. As new cases emerged monthly, the investigators' attention was increasingly divided, further hindering progress on the case. When Sarah's family learned that the police were struggling to manage the influx of tips, they stepped in to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a tech company and successfully lobbied the company's management to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000 in the 1990s. This generous donation allowed the police to centralize and process the leads more efficiently, categorizing them for easy review. Despite their best efforts, however, every lead ultimately led to a dead end, and the case remained stagnant for years to come. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates prepared to graduate, and as a tribute to their friend, they raised a substantial amount of money to create a memorial in her honor. The memorial took the form of a bench featuring a metal casting of Sarah's belongings alongside a poignant photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Although the case was periodically reopened and re-examined in the years that followed, the outcome remained the same. The perpetrator remained at large. During this time, the police conducted thousands of interviews and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects. But all these efforts ultimately proved fruitless. In 2011, 20 years after the murder, a detective decided to utilize modern technology to aid in the investigation. He contacted a genetic genealogy company, inquiring if they could help locate relatives of the individual who left DNA on the victim's body. The experts accepted the challenge, but unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. Two main factors contributed to their failure. Firstly, genetic genealogy was still in its early stages and the experts were limited. For instance, they couldn't simultaneously search for both male and female relatives from the same DNA sample. If the DNA was from a male, they could only search for male familial connections and vice versa. Secondly, legal obstacles hindered their progress, as various laws prohibited the use of genetic data samples to search for relatives of suspects. The researchers the detective approached had spent years tracing the genetic family tree of the British passengers who arrived in the United States on the Mayflower in 1620. By analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found a link to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracking the attacker's lineage proved extremely difficult, especially considering the passage of time. Although the Mayflower had only around 100 passengers, their descendants now number over 25 million. Despite the initial setback, this was the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a crime. The detective gathered available information and identified several local residents with the surname Fuller. He showed them pictures of the men, but none were recognized by the witnesses, including a runner and 2 men who had stumbled upon the body as children. Next, the detective collected DNA samples from all the local Fullers and sent them to the lab. Although none of the samples matched the attacker's DNA, one surprising discovery emerged. One of the men was a distant descendant of Robert Fuller from the Mayflower. However, he was not the killer and had no knowledge of any distant relatives living nearby. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. In 2011, a company had taken over the study of the DNA sample from the assailant, and the new team reached out to them. Given the significant advancements in genetic material study capabilities, the experts agreed to try to trace the assailant's lineage. Over the next 2 years, they painstakingly worked through public databases to find even the most distant relatives of the assailant, then manually traced their family connections to individuals who lived during the time of Sarah's death. After eliminating several thousand individuals, they finally got a break in September 2019. They identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were descendants of Robert Fuller. The experts concluded that it was highly probable that a DNA sample found on Sarah's clothing belonged to one of the brothers at the time of the murder. The older brother, Edward, was a career criminal with a long history of violent offenses, and his DNA profile was already in the FBI database, ruling him out as a suspect in Sarah's murder. The younger brother, Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, But his DNA sample was not in the database because it was collected before the DNA profiles of offenders were added. The detectives put 55-year-old Patrick under surveillance right away. 2 days later, they got their chance. Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. When he was done, he carelessly threw the butt on the ground. One of the officers quickly picked it up and put it in an evidence bag, then returned to his car. Patrick repeated this process, stepping outside to smoke again, and this time a cloth handkerchief accidentally fell out of his pocket. The police thought it wise to take this second piece of evidence, just in case they couldn't get a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. As it turned out, the forensic experts had no problem obtaining samples from both items. The next day, they had the long-awaited news for the detective. Patrick's DNA matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing back in 1991 perfectly. The judge immediately issued a warrant for Patrick's arrest, and the police took him into custody. It took investigators 5 days to identify the suspect and formally charge him with murder. Once his biography was made public, an obvious question arose. Why had a man with such a criminal history not been considered a suspect for 28 years? Patrick Nicholas, at 19, had attempted to assault a young woman who managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming to safety. He was later arrested and spent 4 years in prison. In 1994, he was arrested again for trying to assault a minor, but his DNA was not recorded in any database because the charge was not serious enough. Over the next 3 decades, his name never surfaced during investigations, and he didn't appear in over 4,000 leads. It was eventually revealed that genetic genealogy experts couldn't trace him back to Robert Fuller because Patrick was adopted and grew up with a different surname. One of the men who discovered Sarah's body when they were children in 1991 immediately asserted that Patrick was undoubtedly the same killer. He admitted that the incident had deeply affected him, as he was only 12 years old when the body was discovered and the perpetrator had seen his face for many years. The witness lived in constant fear that the killer would come after him, and only after Patrick's arrest did he finally feel safe. Patrick's trial did not start until 2023. Despite claiming innocence, the main piece of evidence, his DNA on the victim's clothing, was a major obstacle. His lawyer attempted to argue that the presence of Patrick's DNA did not necessarily mean he was guilty, but this claim was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this entirely unreliable. In the end, Patrick was found guilty of first-degree murder without premeditation on May 25th. He received a prison sentence of 45 years and 8 months, effectively ensuring he would never be released. At the sentencing, Patrick remained emotionless, in contrast to Sarah's family, who thanked the judge, trial participants, and investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. It was a chilly day on November 28, 1992, when something unusual caught the eye of a group of people near the Walker Wildlife Area, off River Road in Colorado. As they approached the spot, they were struck with horror. The decomposed body of a man lay there, missing its skull. But even in death, the man was making a statement. He wore green shorts with bold black designs and a tanned black pullover shirt with a mysterious logo on the left side of the chest. The sleeves were cut off at the biceps. The people called it in, and authorities sprang into action, racing to the scene with sirens blaring. As they arrived, they quickly got to work, scouring the area for any clues that could help them identify the man. They searched high and low, turning over every stone, but alas, nothing came up. Even the man's clothes yielded no hints as to his identity, leaving the authorities scratching their heads in bewilderment. With no other choice, they took the body away for autopsy and identification, hoping that they could at least get some answers there. The medical examiner performed the autopsy, and what they discovered left them reeling. The man had been stabbed to death, leaving no doubt it was a case of homicide. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, and fear began to set in. Who would do such a thing and why? The investigators knew that they had their work cut out for them, and they were determined to solve the gruesome crime. Little did they know the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns, leading them down a dark path of mystery and intrigue. The investigation began with a sense of purpose, as detectives searched for any lead that could bring them closer to solving the mystery. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, it became clear that this was going to be no ordinary case. The trail was cold, and every lead they pursued led them to a dead end. The absence of the man's head was a puzzle that haunted them day and night. Where could it have gone? Was it taken as a trophy, or was it buried somewhere out of sight? The detectives were determined to get to the bottom of it all, but they were up against a formidable adversary: time. As the months turned into years, the case became colder and colder. The memories of the man in green shorts began to fade, and it seemed as though justice would never be served. However, detectives never gave up hope, and they would one day uncover the truth. Years passed, and new technologies emerged that promised to make their jobs easier. In 2011, the case was revisited, and the National Missing and Unidentified Person Systems was brought in to assist in the investigation. But despite their best efforts, the detectives found themselves once again hitting a dead end. Every lead they pursued seemed to fizzle out, and they were left with nothing but more questions. It was a frustrating time for everyone involved as they grappled with the realization that they may never uncover the man's true identity. But the detectives refused to give up, even as the years continued to tick by. They knew that there was always a chance that new information could come to light, and they remained ever vigilant, never letting the case slip completely from their minds. In the year 2022, the Mesa County Sheriff's Office was determined to leave no stone unturned in their quest to bring justice for the man in green shorts. They knew that traditional investigative methods had failed them in the past, so they decided to turn to cutting-edge technology for help. They reached out to Othrim, a forensic DNA analysis company, in the hopes that advanced genetic testing could help them finally establish the man's identity or identify a close relative who could provide vital information. It was a long shot, but detectives were willing to try anything to crack the case. But advanced DNA testing doesn't come cheap, and the detectives knew that they would need to secure funding to move forward. So they turned to DNA Solves, a platform that combines crowdfunding, volunteer data, and cutting-edge genomics to solve unsolvable cases. Thanks to the tireless efforts of the detectives and the generosity of the public, the funds were raised and the testing could begin. The skeletal remains of the man in green shorts were a puzzle that had confounded detectives for nearly 3 decades. But the remarkable advancements in forensic science helped them to finally begin putting some of the pieces together. The remains were carefully packaged up and sent to Othrim's state-of-the-art lab in the Woodlands, Texas. There, a team of brilliant forensic scientists worked tirelessly to extract DNA from the bones and build a comprehensive genetic profile for the unknown man. Using a cutting-edge technique called forensic-grade genome sequencing, they were able to piece together a complete DNA sequence, painting a picture of the man's genetic makeup like never before. But having a DNA profile was just the beginning. The team at Othrim knew they needed to use this information to generate investigative leads that could help them to identify the man. And that's exactly what they did. With the help of their in-house genealogy team, they employed the power of forensic genetic genealogy to trace the man's distant relatives and create a comprehensive family tree. This information was then shared with the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, who were then able to identify a potential sibling of the unknown man. With a DNA sample from the sibling, the team at Othrim was able to confirm that the unidentified man was Edith Thomas E.T. Romero. The discovery of Edith's identity was a significant breakthrough for the Mesa County Sheriff's Office. But with the mystery of his death still unsolved, detectives knew they had to dig deeper to uncover the truth. Edith had come a long way from his early life, but the details of his upbringing remained shrouded in mystery. Despite this, detectives were able to piece together a picture of the man he had become. As detectives delved into his past, they discovered a man who had lived a life of service and sacrifice. His military service was just one example of the courage and bravery that defined him. They discovered that Edith was just 26 years old when he met his untimely end. He had ventured to Grand Junction, Colorado in the company of 2 other individuals from Louisiana in 1991. He resided in a now-demolished house on 4th Street and worked as a dishwasher in a local eatery. The details surrounding his death remained hazy, but it is believed that he was killed during the summer of 1992. Now, as detectives continue to piece together Edith's story, they're asking for the public's help. If you have any information that could shed light on his untimely death, please do not hesitate to contact the authorities. Every little bit of information could bring us closer to the truth. The case of Natalie Connolly. In the picturesque English countryside, a story of love and betrayal took a tragic turn, leaving a young mother's life in jeopardy. This is the story of Natalie Connolly, a tale of domestic abuse, resilience, and the pursuit of justice amidst unimaginable cruelty. Natalie, a devoted mother and partner, found herself trapped in a cycle of abuse that would culminate in a harrowing ordeal. Her story stands as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking behind closed doors and the courage required to break free from the shackles of domestic violence. Natalie Connolly was a captivating beauty, both in appearance and charm. Her identical twin sister shared her lovely looks and deep connection. Natalie had a natural talent for bringing joy to others, easily sparking laughter and engaging in conversation with everyone she met. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Natalie was wholly devoted to ensuring her daughter Madison had everything she needed. Natalie's unwavering dedication as a mother was evident in her constant presence and adoration for Madison, which fostered a strong admiration from her daughter. In a bustling bar, Natalie met John, a charming and debonair man who immediately caught her eye. Their connection was instantaneous, drawn together by an undeniable magnetic pull. Despite John being in his late 30s, his charm and wit quickly captivated Natalie's heart. Before long, they exchanged contact details, eager to explore their budding connection and spend more time together. Natalie found herself irresistibly attracted to John from the moment they met, though initially unaware of his occupation or wealth. As they grew closer, John revealed his status as a multimillionaire, a fact reinforced by his extravagant displays of affection. Lavish gifts flowed freely from his generous hand, and their evenings together were filled with luxurious dinners at high-end restaurants. His opulent mansion seemed to be plucked from a fairy tale, leaving Natalie spellbound by his refined and gentlemanly demeanor. Contrary to the charming facade John projected, he harbored a trove of hidden truths. It soon came to light that John's life was far more complex than he had let on. Amidst his engagement to a pregnant partner, with whom he anticipated their second child, John concealed the existence of 3 additional children. His involvement with Natalie was revealed to be an affair that persisted even as he navigated the dissolution of his prior relationship, ultimately choosing to redirect his focus towards her. Their romance unfolded like pages from a fairy tale from the onset. John and Madison formed an instant bond, while Natalie effortlessly won over John's children, showering her with lavish gifts and luxuries like spa days and a personal chauffeur. John seemed to fulfill every dream imaginable, yet amidst the opulence, reality set in. When Natalie moved in with John on his estate in Kinver, Staffordshire, England, their relationship was initially fueled by passion. However, living together revealed the true nature of their dynamic. True understanding emerges when you share every aspect of your daily lives. John's preferences leaned heavily towards the rougher side, reminiscent of scenes from the 50 Shades of Grey series, much to Natalie's discomfort. He derived pleasure from causing her pain during intimate moments, often leaving visible evidence of his aggression in the form of bruises and cuts. The extravagant dinners and romantic gestures began to lose their appeal when Natalie realized the steep emotional cost they came with. What once seemed like a fairy tale now bore the stark reality of a tumultuous relationship. Despite her reservations, Natalie reluctantly acquiesced to John's demands during their intense encounters, driven by a fear of abandonment similar to what he had done to his pregnant ex-fiancée. Despite struggling with this significant issue, she found contentment within the relationship and hesitated to leave, fearing a return to the monotony of her previous life. Seeking solace and guidance, she confided in her sister and mother, revealing the wounds and bruises that bore witness to John's violent tendencies during their intense sexual encounters. While acknowledging John's prowess in the bedroom, she also disclosed the distressing reality of his penchant for inflicting pain. Natalie found herself torn between the pleasure John provided and the harm he caused. She was caught in a dilemma, struggling to reconcile her desire to maintain the lavish lifestyle with John and her dissatisfaction with the intimate aspect of their relationship. Signs of strain became apparent as both Natalie and John sought connections outside their partnership. John engaged in conversations with other women, while Natalie also found herself messaging other men. When John uncovered Natalie's exchanges, his reaction was one of fury. While he didn't hesitate to pursue interactions with women himself, he vehemently opposed Natalie's involvement with other men, revealing a glaring double standard in their relationship dynamic. However, he remained silent, masking any signs of unease. On December 18, 2016, John proposed what seemed like a normal evening together. Drinks, watching a football game, and sharing supper. He ensured Natalie had an abundance of alcohol and even provided cocaine, though to a lesser extent than he consumed himself. This wasn't the first time he had orchestrated such a scenario, suggesting a pattern of behavior aimed at loosening her up before subjecting her to his despicable actions once they were alone at home. Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions may have been an attempt to numb herself to the anticipated pain she knew she would endure once behind closed doors with John. For him, maintaining absolute control was paramount, ensuring he could fully indulge in his intentions towards Natalie without compromising his faculties. He meticulously regulated his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a state of mild intoxication that wouldn't impede his actions. During their sexual encounters, following a seemingly delightful day out, culminating in a satisfying meal at one of their favorite establishments, John arranged for their driver to transport them home. However, beneath the facade of normalcy lurked John's sinister and malevolent intentions for that day. Natalie's intoxication was clearly evident, and the meal had not helped sober her up or absorb the alcohol. Disoriented, she stumbled out of the car upon their arrival home, inadvertently leaving her phone behind. The responsible course of action would have been to provide her with water and guide her to bed to sleep it off. However, John Broadhurst had far darker intentions in mind. Upon the driver's return with Natalie's phone, it remains unclear whether John accessed her messages. Subsequent toxicological testing and autopsy results painted a grim picture of Natalie's state. Despite her incapacitation, John was resolute in his desire for retribution, disregarding any potential consequences. Natalie became the unwilling recipient of his brutal advances, as he orchestrated her suffering to inflict maximum harm. He subjected her to a barrage of violence, including punches, kicks, stomps, and the act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To compound her agony, he used a bottle of carpet cleaner as a weapon, twisting and tearing at her. Once he had finished his cruel assault, he abandoned Natalie, naked and bloodied, at the base of the stairs, her skirt pulled up around her waist, left to succumb to her injuries. She lay in a pool of her own blood as John callously retreated to bed. Hours later, upon awakening, he discovered Natalie lifeless, having succumbed to the numerous horrific wounds inflicted upon her, totaling a staggering 40. John's subsequent actions, including his unconvincing performance during the emergency call for an ambulance, revealed his warped psychological state. His detachment and lack of remorse were chillingly evident as he casually informed the operator of his futile attempts at CPR, referring to Natalie's lifeless state with callous indifference. Following Natalie's pronounced death, he was apprehended by authorities. In a feeble attempt to justify his heinous deeds, he offered the excuse of rough sex gone too far, claiming innocence and alleging that Natalie had actively consented to the extreme acts inflicted upon her. According to John's twisted narrative, Natalie purportedly requested the injuries, the violence, and even the insertion of the carpet cleaning bottle into her body, and she purportedly reassured him amidst the blood and pain. He claimed that she reassured him of her well-being, and expressed a desire for more of the same, painting himself as a mere pawn in her tragic demise. John attempted to deflect responsibility by asserting that Natalie willingly participated in rough sexual activities, claiming they had engaged in similar encounters numerous times without issue. When questioned about leaving her partially clothed at the foot of the stairs, he offered the feeble excuse that it was a routine occurrence. and that he had never provided blankets, as the house was consistently warm throughout the proceedings. John displayed a notable absence of remorse or contrition, instead placing blame squarely on Natalie's shoulders. Despite being found guilty of manslaughter, he received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, serving only 22 months before regaining his freedom. The Natalie Connolly case sparked widespread criticism, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the We Can't Consent to This movement. McKenzie aims to ignite discussions on sexual assault and eliminate the rough sex defense, which trivializes violence in relationships. However, some still accept the court's decision, viewing it as an isolated incident rather than a systemic issue, risking victim blaming. This highlights the need for advocacy and education to challenge harmful narratives and support survivors. The rough sex murder defense was unequivocally prohibited with the passage of the Domestic Abuse Bill by Parliament on July 6, 2020, following the granting of royal assent on April 29, 2021. The Domestic Abuse Act of 2021 represents a crucial step forward in addressing and combating domestic violence, ensuring that perpetrators can no longer exploit such harmful defenses to justify their actions. Natalie's untimely death left a profound void in the lives of her family and friends, who continue to grapple with the pain of her loss. Their unwavering love and support for Natalie serve as a testament to her enduring spirit. In the aftermath, the community rallied together to raise awareness about domestic abuse and to support survivors in their journey towards healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion stand as a beacon of hope in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Though Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory lives on in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. May her story inspire us to stand against domestic abuse and to offer support to those in need. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.